Okay, today is May the 9th, 2007, and we're in the OSU Library in Tulsa. And today we're speaking with Carolyn Thomas Taylor, and she was in the House of Representatives from 1984 through 1992, correct?
Correct.
So glad you were able to join us today. And my first question is, bring us up to date a little bit about your childhood, your hometown, your youth, basically.
Born in Norman, Oklahoma, where my parents were also born, and most of my family had been there for quite some time. Went through the Norman public school system, and of course, I hate to tell an OSU person this, but when you're born in Norman, you know there's nowhere else to go but the University of Oklahoma. So after I graduated from Norman High School, I went to OU and got my bachelor's degree in American history. Went back and then I got my teaching certificate after my bachelor's degree. Always wanted to go to law school, but decided I wanted to also teach too, and so I thought I'd teach a while and then maybe go to law school later in life. But I loved teaching so much that I was fortunate to be hired as the government teacher at Norman High School, where I recently graduated from. So that was a kind of a strange thing, teaching alongside most of my old teachers, or former teachers, and now as colleagues. And while I was the government teacher at Norman High School, I got involved in helping, volunteering on political campaigns of pro-education candidates, and went to the Capitol a couple times lobbying on behalf of education, or Teacher Day at the Capitol, OEA Day at the Capitol, that kind of thing. And then in 1984, the summer of 1984, actually I was I'd been awarded a Fulbright scholarship to go spend the summer studying politics and government in the Middle East. And the incumbent state representative, Cleta Dethridge Mitchell, decided really at the last moment not to run for re-election. And so some people called and asked if I would be interested in thinking about running. And that was something I'd always wanted to do someday. Hadn't thought of myself doing that at 27 years old. But, that opportunity comes along where it's an open seat, and kind of it was a last minute thing. And I knew I would really want to do that at some point. So I talked to the principal of the high school, and he was very helpful, and we got the school board to give me a leave of absence for the fall semester. So if I lost, I could come back for the spring. I wouldn't be at a job I loved. And so it plunged, started running for office, had to give up the Fulbright scholarship and started knocking doors instead, and was elected in November and stayed till 1992. While I was in the legislature, I went to school at night at OU and got my master's degree in political science and started working on my doctorate. And then when I left the legislature in 92 to move to Claremore because I got married, I finished my doctorate actually at OSU because Tulsa here, this campus, was much closer, and I could get most of my courses here rather than commuting back and forth to Norman. And OSU was wonderful. They took all my OU hours, and I just had to finish up a little bit at here. And then I did take a class or two in Stillwater, where Nancy Lewis and I would drive over there together. She was working on her degree at the same time. And so we both graduated with our doctorates in higher education, and I've been teaching ever since at Rogers State University in political science in Claremore, and love it.
Well, let's go back to your campaign a little bit. Who was your campaign manager?
I asked a friend of mine who was a fellow teacher at Norman High School. She was a business teacher, and of course teachers have the summers off, and so her name was Paula Roberts, and she managed my campaign during the summer until school started, and then she sort of did it after school and on weekends at nights after that, and did an excellent job. We're still very good friends. She's now, after she left teaching, she became the election board secretary for Cleveland County, so she's still very active in politics.
Did she do it for each of your campaigns?
Yes, she did it for all 4 campaigns.
And do you remember about how much you paid on each one?
Well, I always paid her whatever was left in my campaign account at the end.
The campaign itself, do you remember how much you spent on the campaign?
On the campaign.
Each time.
My very first campaign, I'd have to go back and check the ballpark. Yeah. First time, 1984 I ran, I think I was spent about $18,000 to $20,000 if I remember right. And then the last campaign, the 92, I guess it would have been the 90. Is that right? Mm-hmm. The 90 campaign, correct. I think it was like 65,000, something like that.
And nowadays it's probably quite a bit more than that.
Oh, a House seat today, minimum would be $100,000. And the state Senate races, the guy that ran this year in Rogers County, he raised over $500,000 for a state Senate race. It's just astronomical. And that's the cost is driven by advertising. You know, so many of the candidates now are on TV and radio and billboards and all that kind of stuff. And back in the mid 80s when I first ran, it was much more low tech. You know, you didn't have to have a website. You didn't do all this. And in an urban area like my district was, which is just the heart of Norman, mostly the OU campus and surrounding area, you know, very compact, easily walkable. So I could meet everybody, and it just wasn't as expensive to run a race like that.
Any favorite campaign stories?
Oh gosh, there's just so many fond memories. I really loved the knocking doors, and there was a group of us. We would campaign. We would go out all day long knocking doors. And Nancy Virtue Lewis, she was running for re-election at the district next to mine, and then Cal Hobson, a good friend of ours, he had another part of Norman, and we would go knock doors all day long, and then we would meet at night every night after dark and have dinner together and just tell campaigns, knocking door stories, or you know, it was just a lot of fun.
No particular one that stands out in your mind is, gee, I can't really believe I did that, or they said that, or.
You know, I guess the first time I ran, I was always so surprised because I didn't have any money, of course, being a school teacher. And I was always surprised knocking doors. People would say, here, let me write you a check when I was there, you know, asking for their vote on their front door. And that was just so surprising to me. I would come home at the end of the day and empty all my pockets out of cash and checks and sit down and write thank you notes for a couple hours. And my mother always teased me, calling me a streetwalker, that, you know, but that's how my first campaign was paid for. It was an amazing thing.
Did your parents help, or did you have siblings that would help?
I do have very fond memories of that because my mother, who's very shy, went out and knocked doors asking people to vote for her daughter, which was a hard thing for her to do. Yes, and all my brothers and sisters. I'm the oldest of 5 kids. But my dad, he took on the job of maintaining all the yard signs. And so that was his project. And of course, he's an engineer, and he had it all down in a very organized engineering kind of way. He had these maps where every sign in town was supposed to be. And at night, he had this little moped at the time he would drive. And at night, he would go out and he would go check every one of them. And if they weren't up, or if the rain had gotten them, or if they'd been stolen or whatever, he'd go replace them. He was the sign guy.
Were your opponents male, female? Or?
First time was a woman. The second time was a man. The third time was a woman. And the fourth time was a man.
Interesting, too.
Yeah.
Are younger, older?
Always older. Always older. Mm-hmm. Much older, usually.
What do you remember the first day you were sworn in?
Oh, sure. That was exciting.
What your thoughts and feelings were?
It was scary, you know, and yet exciting at the same time. I'd gotten to know some of the other members of the House because either they didn't have races, and so they'd come help me, and which was common. People help each other, you know. And so I was glad I already had some people I knew there, and of course the local district area representatives like Cal and Nancy and others, Vicki White. that was fun that we were all there together as friends.
Did you have a particular role model while you were there, mentor that would?
Oh, definitely Cal Hobson taught me a lot, and I always looked up to him, and he was very, very helpful, not only helping get me elected, raised lots of money, and really paved the way as someone who was so totally naive about the whole thing in many respects. And then Nancy Virtue, who had gotten elected 2 years prior to me in 19, she was, I guess, first elected in 82. So she was very helpful, showing me the ropes. And I had been her campaign manager. And so we had gone through campaigns together, of course, but now as colleagues in the legislature, we were friends, and that was a nice thing.
What was it like presenting your first bill?
Oh, well, it's always, I don't know if they still do this, but every time a freshman introduces their first bill, everyone picks on them, and asks them a million questions and just tries to, make it initiation process, I guess. And my first bill, you'll appreciate this, the director of the Norman Public Library at the time, his name was Bill Lowry, had asked me to introduce a bill ensuring privacy rights of people that checked out material of the library. So the records, I guess, of books or magazines or whatever you checked out would remain private. And at the time it wasn't. And so he asked me to do that. And that was my very first bill. And I remember all the guys giving me such a hard time about that and asking questions, just silly questions. You mean if so-and-so goes in to check out or look at a Playboy magazine in the library, we won't be able to find out, and all that kind of thing. Or this John Monks, who was just crazy guy from Muskogee, he stood up and gave a long speech against it, saying, this is the first thing communists do when they come in, and this is just the road to communism, But now, of course, with everything, with the Patriot Act and all that, how far we've come. But that was my very first bill.
And did it pass?
It passed.
And what did you do to celebrate?
Oh, nothing.
Just a sigh of relief.
Just a sigh of relief. It was over. Yeah.
And what was your office like? What floor? And did you have to share space?
I don't think I ever did have to share the space, come to think of it. And then when I became chairman of the education committee, the committee chairs always had much nicer offices, and so I had a real fancy office then. It was nice. But see, I started out on the third floor. I guess I was always on the third floor.
Same one, or it changed?
No, it just changed every time. Every 2 years it would change.
Describe a typical day. How early would you get there and how late would you stay?
Well, because Norman is on, commutable to Oklahoma City, I didn't ever stay in a hotel, so I would go back and forth. And usually the session would begin at 9 or 10 in the morning, or there would be committee meetings at 9 or 10 in the morning. So I'd typically get up and leave Norman about 8 and get to the Capitol about 8:30 and get organized and answer, mail and email. Well, not email at the time, but try and get into phone calls and get ready for the day's meetings and appointments. And then usually all the work at the Capitol would end about 5 or 6. And then every night there would be receptions. Different groups would be hosting for the legislators, and we go to usually there are 2 or 3 a night of those. You'd make the rounds, and then after that was over, oftentimes a group of us would go have dinner together or hang out together somewhere. And that's when so much of the real work actually gets done, because you're socializing with people and getting to know them and what's important to them and their district. And so that all was very helpful when you were then trying to the next day or sometime get them to vote for something for you. You would know a lot more about them. And that would be a typical day during January to May. If it was a campaign year, then beginning in May to November, I'd be knocking doors and campaigning. Norman is a very, very active district in terms of organizations and things to go to and events. And so, I was always amazed the legislators from the rural areas don't have as many opportunities, I guess, or expectations to go to so many events. But in Norman, and I'm sure Stillwater's this way too, the Rotary Club and the Lions Club and the Kiwanis Club and the League of Women Voters and every group in town wants you or asks you at some point to come be a speaker or to come do something. And so there was lots and lots of civic responsibilities and that went on year round during the legislative session and off. And so it is truly, I don't think people realize that it's truly a full-time job. And then off session there would be interim studies and all kinds of work still going on at the Capitol. And so it was very demanding. And that's one of the reasons why I chose not to run for re-election in 92 was I was physically worn out every day, these 12, 14-hour days, and there's really not a break. And I just needed a rest, and I couldn't see a way of doing that and staying in it. Maybe it was the way I was doing it, which was aggressive, but I was ready for a break. I needed one.
Did you do your own research for your bills?
Typically not. The staff was very good about, I would ask them to gather information for me. I didn't have time to do that myself. And then I would, of course, read everything. At the same time, remember, I was going to school, and so I had those responsibilities and didn't have time to do both.
And you probably ate lunch in then most days.
Typically, lunch was a bag of popcorn from the Capitol cafeteria or snack bar.
Well, did you do any bills that didn't get passed that you really wish had? Or
I think I was always pretty lucky. I think most everything passed. Not always on the first time around. I remember I did lose. This was back when I was chairman of the education subcommittee of the appropriations committee, which controls the budget for most of the education-related agencies, colleges and universities, career tech, K-12, Arts Council, Department of Libraries, and the Math Science School. And at the time, the Math Science School was brand new, and it was just established, which was very controversial at the time. And I remember the first year, it was my job to get the appropriations bill passed for the Math Science School. And all the rural area legislators were against it, thinking this was just a big city thing and was going to drain talent from their area. And so on the first round, that bill the money to pay for the school didn't pass. I remember that was the first time I think I ever lost a bill, we would call that. But then it comes back, you can bring it back up, and it passed the second time, and they were just wanting to show that they didn't support the Math Science School. That was their way of doing it. And that personally wasn't a bill of mine. I just had to, it was my job to carry out as the appropriations person. But every bill that I guess I sponsored on my own, I don't think I remember ever losing one.
That's good.
Yeah, it was good.
Well, how many other women were serving at the time you were?
I think there were 6 or 7 of us during most of the time I was there.
Did you do things together with them, or everybody was just too busy?
We tried that. We tried a women's caucus, the House and the Senate together, and it didn't work, unfortunately. And we fell into the Democratic women did things together, and the Republican women did things together. We didn't try hard enough to find areas that we could both work on together. There was just too many differences in policy.
Well, did you notice if the women were treated any differently than the men in any particular area?
People ask me that, and I never felt treated differently because I was a woman. I was treated very differently because I was young, because I was 27 years old. Most of everyone else have been my grandfather. And that was the biggest hurdle, them seeing me as not somebody that could be their granddaughter, and as an equal colleague or partner. But once we got to know each other, that went away very rapidly. And I think they respected me for the things that I cared about, and I hopefully showed respect for them, the things they cared about, and we became friends. But initially, that was a greater hurdle than a gender gap, and maybe it's because when I was first elected in 1984, the two previous representatives from Norman had been women, Cleta before me, and then Mina Hibden before her. And so there was this history of the woman representative from Norman, was always a girl, they would say. And so it just wasn't a big deal.
That's good to hear.
But there was always a joke. And then the person that followed me was a woman, Laura Boyd. And the person then that after her in that seat, District 44, was Bill Nations, who won. And he would always call me up, and when he was thinking about running, and say, "Can a man win in this district?" Before I could jump into it, would Norman ever elect a man?
I read in one of the newspaper articles that you had given out Doonesbury cartoons.
Oh yeah, that really made the boys mad. One of the first bills in a committee room that my first year was to let county commissioners decide the property tax rate for the county. And I was against that because that is where revenue largely comes from for public education. And I could see that funding source, being a political then issue and rapidly declining. And so and so fought that bill. And the way I did that was in committee. That was immediately after the county commissioner scandal in Oklahoma, and there had been some cartoons about that. And so I just wanted to point out that not it was a good deal to put in their hands the tax rate that funded public education at the time. And so that made, of course, the sponsor of the bill, who was a very powerful legislator at the time, Lloyd Benson, very, very angry at me, and made all the county commissioners in the state pretty mad at me too. I got some interesting mail after that. But it defeated the bill, so that's fine.
Oh, did they speak to you later then?
Oh, sure. We all made up. Can't stay mad at each other very long because you need their votes and they need your vote.
Well, did you chair any other committees besides the education?
I always chaired the education committee and the subcommittee on education on the appropriations committee. I was a member of many other committees, and I chaired some special committees during the interim that were more study committees.
Were you the lone woman on some of those?
Oh, most of the time.
Do you have a particular political philosophy?
I've never thought about a philosophy.
Slow than this?
No, I guess I have to think about that.
And I had read that you supported, I don't know if you proposed it or you supported the amendment to make the House rule gender neutral.
Oh, that just, I don't know, one day it hit me reading all these bills that it was always the pronoun was always the male, and all the state laws were written as if the entire population of Oklahoma was male. And so I proposed that the language in the statutes and in these bills be gender neutral, and that was a wild day. That it was just sort of a spur of the moment thing, and when it hit the floor, it was just a wild debate, and the press went crazy about it, and it was funny.
What was the result?
It passed. It did, and that was. I think that got more press than so many of the other things that I did that were a lot more significant.
Okay. Okay, well, what would you think would be the most significant thing you did then?
Oh, I think a couple of things. Working to get became known as House Bill 1017, which was a massive education reform and funding bill that it raised taxes, and it also for the classroom directed to education, and then it had a whole host of reforms that now have been copied around the country. Many other states have passed very similar pieces of legislation or have tried to. There was an initiative petition to defeat then that bill becoming law, and so we had a statewide vote on it. So I was very involved not only in the drafting and passage of the legislation, but then defending it before a statewide vote, and it survived, and that was just such an enormous and rewarding thing at the time, because that's my passion. I guess that's my philosophy, is everything revolves around education, and seeing that from beginning to end, which was many years and process. That was very, very rewarding. I worked on a number of family and women's related issues, and passed legislation creating family leave, a family leave policy for all state employees in Oklahoma, which was at the time revolutionary. Now it's not, because federal law has now done that. I passed a law that required and provided for prenatal care in every county's health department, which wasn't at the time available. I think one of the things I am the most proud of, is getting the bill to create the Oklahoma Museum of Natural History, which is on the Norman campus at OU, and then being able to provide the funding for that to be built, because I love natural history, and I thought that would be something in the long run that could show and preserve Oklahoma's natural history, of course. And it's a magnificent facility, and I think the largest on a university campus in the country. And I go there now and I see all these kids coming and all the great programs that they have, and that's a very rewarding feeling as well.
Your legacies.
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, your very last day of office, what was that like?
Oh, it was very emotional, because you work so hard to get there, and I felt good about the things that I'd accomplished, and so I was sad, I guess, on the one hand, to be leaving all that behind, but I was excited as well, because I knew I was going to be moving into just another phase of my life, and getting married and having the opportunity then. I had hoped to have a family, and starting my career in higher education, which is where I always wanted to end up, returning to the classroom. So it was good. People were very, very kind, and from both parties, friends and Democrats and Republicans, and it was sentimental.
Any thoughts over doing it again?
Probably not. I think it's somebody else's turn, and I enjoy what I'm doing now, and I stay very active in Oklahoma politics and advice, and helping people with their campaigns, and helping recruit people to run, and educate. Just my job at RSU, being a political science professor, I hopefully encourage younger people to get involved more in politics. I think that is important right now.
Well, what advice would you give to women who are interested in going into politics?
Well, don't be afraid of it. There's everything you're doing now is exempt. The talents that women have in their jobs or in their roles as mothers or sisters or in the workplace is no different than the skills that you need in the legislative environment. In fact, it's exactly the skills you need in the legislative environment. And many studies have shown, that what a woman brings to an elective arena is the ability to compromise, the ability to bring people together, the ability to get things done, the ability to plan and execute, a goal and then accomplishing that, whether it's legislation or some other program, and that women are good at that, and that's what we do all the time in whatever we do, and so don't think you're not qualified. I hear that, oh, I just could never do that, or I'm not a lawyer, or I just wouldn't be able to do what it takes. Well, that's silly. You're doing that now, and you just don't know it. And so the money will come. A lot of people, that's the other hurdle. Oh, how in the world would I don't have $100,000 or whatever? And that's not your personal money. People will provide you. They'll give you campaign contributions. You just have to jump out there and ask. And that's a hard thing too sometimes for women to do. But boy, that was hard for me the first time, or for a long time. But then it's not hard, and we need more women in government and in elective offices, because it does make a difference. Women bring different issues to the table, and women have a different way of getting things done, and we sorely need that in Oklahoma.
And it seems to me that women that are closer to the capital area are more apt to run. They don't have to leave family, way out.
That's true. We've had in Oklahoma more women elected. If you look from the Oklahoma City and the Tulsa, the urban areas, and it's been taken a long time for women to win from rural areas and places further away from the capital. That now is starting to change. Our lieutenant governor now is from a rural area and served in the Oklahoma House of Representatives for a long time. And we have several women now from rural areas, and so that's a good thing.
Any of your siblings get into politics after your success?
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if my daughter does. She's very, I think her personality, she would do very well in that environment. I don't know about my son. I think he will be very politically active, but I would be surprised if he put his name on the ballot. I think he will make a difference in other ways.
Any memorable events from like the first week or two afterwards, after you finished, like second thoughts or
regrets?
Yeah.
No. I was
looking ahead.
Just looking ahead. That's exactly right.
Well, some of the women I've interviewed haven't gotten into politics until they retired at 65, so maybe
well,
look ahead a little bit more.
That's right. And when you nationally and in Oklahoma, that is the trend, that women wait in politics as their second or their third career. They put family first or their career first, and then politics comes in their 50s or 60s typically. I didn't do that. I did it on the front end. I guess I did it reversed. I had my political years, and then I had my family years. And so looking at the makeup and the changes at the Capitol, since the 80s, the legislature is much younger, both male and female, much better educated in terms of degrees, and I think that's bringing some positive things to state capital and state government.
Seems to be a lot of lawyers.
But there always will be lots of lawyers, and that's good too. The reason for that, I think, is there will always, you can practice law and still be in government or in elective office, or you can stop doing that for a while. And most people's jobs, you can't do that. You have to quit your job to run for office. That's why you see a heavier concentration of insurance agents or farmers or lawyers, because they can afford to have somebody taking care of the business back home while they're in Oklahoma City, or they can do it at the same time. A school teacher can't run for office. They've got to quit their job, or a state employee, or somebody that's running a small business or working for someone else, unless their boss is just going to let them do that for a while. And so that's one of the reasons why we have a preponderance of lawyers in the legislature, is that they've got the flexibility to do that.
I just can't imagine what you would feel like walking up the steps into the Capitol thinking I'm here to do the state's
business.
Mm-hmm.
It's an awesome responsibility, but it's rewarding, and gosh, you learn so much. And I've always told people it was the greatest graduate school in the world.
Did you have to change your attire? We have to buy a whole new wardrobe?
Oh, I did. All I had was my teacher clothes, and so I remember buying my first suit and first high heels. I think was when I was elected.
And you wore suits most days?
Most
or
days.
all days?
Most days, sure. Yeah.
Was that part of the dress codes, or you just figured that might give you more leverage with the guys?
Oh, I think you just wanted to be, look professional and be treated like a professional. And the men all wore suits, and so we did too. Plus, the chamber is very cold, and I think that's because the men always control the temperature, and so I always wanted to have on as many clothes as possible just to stay warm. And that's when I started drinking coffee. I didn't ever drink coffee until I was in the legislature, but just to stay warm.
Did it affect you any other ways?
Oh, I hope not. I think maybe I did have greater respect for people different than me. I certainly learned a lot about Oklahoma that I didn't know when I first went to the Capitol. I had a very limited experience just being from Norman, and I learned a lot about the rest of the state from the other representatives and senators because in the districts that they represented, and had an opportunity to go to a lot of parts of Oklahoma that I normally wouldn't have gone to.
Well, did you find that you had a question that would keep popping up from constituents?
Oh, when I first ran for office, there was that you're too young, or you're too quiet, and you're not mean enough. I heard that a lot. How are you going to survive? You're just not mean enough. Like, you had to be mean to be in. I didn't quite get that. But then that went away after my first year in office. People never asked me that anymore.
But once you were in, did they ask you to do a common question like, can you fix this or can you fix that? Was there something they ask pretty regularly?
You can't be an expert in everything. And so, my background was education, and that was the area that I spent most of my time legislating in or chairing committees or hearings in. And so what people do is they would come to me with questions about education. And hopefully they felt like I would give them the right answer or the straight answer or whatever. I know nothing about corrections or environmental policy or other things. And so I would go to other people that I respected for that. And so we a lot of times people sort of tend to specialize in different policy areas. And so that was the biggest thing. People would come to me if it was education related questions or funding questions or those kinds of things. And I would go to them for issues I know nothing about.
You had to do a lot of networking then, it sounds like.
Oh, yes. Lots. That's a lot of it. It sure is.
Well, did your constituents come and want pictures made with you?
They wanted everything. Like I said, Norman's just a very active district, and so they want you to come speak to every organization you can imagine, or every school's graduations, or letters, citations for birthdays or anniversaries, or pictures, or can their kids come to the Capitol, or can the class come to the Capitol, and just an enormous amount of that kind of constituent service, which it was fun. I loved doing all that. That's a good way to stay in touch too.
Well, did you have to travel to like DC or out of the state in the admin position?
I went to a number of conferences, education-related conferences. I was often asked to speak at some of those things. I was real excited once I got invited to big deal in New York City and was asked to be on a panel. And kind of once you do that, then your name gets out there, or you're known as someone that can talk and knows something about what they're talking about. And so that was exciting to get to be invited to some of those kinds of things. And then another, I guess, facet of it is then other representatives and senators would ask me to come to their districts and talk to their clubs or their groups or whatever. And so I did an enormous amount of that for them, and or come help campaign for them, or come talk to their teachers about, education or whatever. And then gave a number of graduation speeches all around the state. And that was all very exciting.
Good memories.
Yeah, it really was. And then the 1017 debates, I was fortunate to be asked to uphold the yes side, and that was very different for me, being on live TV debating, people on the other side of an issue. That was frightening, but turned out fine. And then first time I ever did OETA, used to have this call-in show where you could call in and ask a representative. They would have someone from the House and somebody from the Senate. And that was live, and that was a little scary at first, but then I came to really enjoy doing that kind of thing.
Think on your feet.
Yeah, you have to think on your feet, but that's what you do as a teacher. And so that wasn't that foreign really to me. And being a teacher in the classroom for several years, your job is to reach every student and communicate with them, and that's what your job is in the legislature, is to communicate and be able to reach and relate with everybody else. And so in a way it was a big classroom, and I think being a teacher was excellent preparation for that environment.
Sounds like. Well, did you have to deal with lobbyists very often?
Oh, sure. The tremendous source of information at the Capitol comes from the lobbyists, and the key is to hear both sides of an issue, but the lobbyists are a very important part of the process, and an even more important part now that term limits have forced people to retire after 12 years. And so there's a tremendous power shift towards the lobbyist, because they're there for 20, 30, 40 years, some of them, and have a lot more expertise and experience at the Capitol than these new representatives and senators coming in. And so, that's a very important part of the legislative process, the lobbyists.
Well, do they still have a doctor and a nurse on duty?
As far as I know, they do. There was always a nurse of the day and the doctor of the day when I was there.
The same one, or does it?
No, it changed every week. It was, I guess, the Oklahoma Nurses Association and the Oklahoma Medical Association would organize that, and so there was always a medical person.
Are you required to check in with them ever so often?
No. I mean, it was nice to have them there the few times that I felt I needed to see a doctor, had a stomach ache or a headache or whatever. That was nice to have them there. But no, you didn't have to check in.
No, one person had mentioned that, and no one else had.
Oh, really?
So I was going to see if that was still the case today.
Well, if the nurse or the doctor was from your district, then it was your job to introduce them on the first day of the week to everybody. But other than that, you didn't have to see them. Mm-hmm. That's funny, that came up. Yeah.
Do you remember who swore you in?
It was Justice Marion Opala on the Supreme Court.
A lady?
No, a man. Marion. Mm-hmm.
Each time? Same
I think so. And he's still there. I'm sure he still does that. Or whoever the Chief Justice is now.
Well, had you considered running one more time, or were you just ready to move on?
Oh, sure. As it got closer to when I had to make an announcement, because I had to give enough time for somebody else to run and to think about filing for office. It sure, there was a lot of pressure, just go one more time, or but there was a couple of people that really expressed some interest in running if and when I didn't run for re-election. So I knew, there were good people out there, and that helped as well. Me deciding to let go and move on, and I was ready.
Do you have any money left over in your campaign? What would you do with it?
Very little. I pretty much used it all up at the end of. I think I used what last little bit I had to write a letter to my district, thanking them and mailing it. Of course, that's your cost for voting for me and for 4 times. And
well, who does the budget? I mean, who keeps track of all of that? You or your?
Most campaigns now have, and I did too, a treasurer, somebody who maintains all the books. And my person was Charles Hollingsworth, who's a banker in Norman. And today it's an enormous job because there's so many laws regarding campaign expenditure and campaign finance, both at the national level and at the state level. And so some candidates now have treasurers, and then they also have accountants, and even in some cases probably a lawyer looking after all that. You certainly would need to do that if you were running a statewide race.
Well, do you want to talk a little bit more about what you're doing now, or what you did immediately after you finished?
Sure. Immediately after I left the legislature, I came to actually this campus and was vice president for academic affairs when it was the University Center at Tulsa, UCT, which was at the time a consortium of OU, OSU, Langston, and Northeastern all offered and brought courses here, and I sort of coordinated all of that. And liked doing it very much, and did it for about 5 or 6 years. And then the opportunity came at Rogers State University, or it was made into a 4-year university by the legislature. And that's 5 minutes from home. And so they asked me if I would like to come be at that campus. And so I was happy to do that. And then the reform happened where this campus became just OSU, and NSU went to Broken Arrow, and OU went to the Schusterman Center, and some of us went to Rogers State University, and that's where I've been ever since. And I'm a professor of political science, and then I also have some administrative responsibilities I do for the president on top of that.
Well, you'd be a good one to ask about other questions I should be asking if your background's in political science as well as haven't done that.
I think you've asked some excellent questions now.
That I haven't covered. I usually end with the one when history's written about you. What would you like for it to say?
Oh, I guess that she made a difference. I mean, I hope that's probably the goal of everybody that gets elected. They really make a difference. And I feel good that I did in education and in women's issues and in children's issues. And it wasn't the phrase at the time, family values, but and I think that phrase is heavily misused today. But I think the things I did hopefully made a difference for families and for children in that state of Oklahoma.
And you still maintain some friendships from that time period too. So.
Very much. Some of my best friends I made at the Capitol, and from both political parties, and we still are very close. And it's an enormous experience professionally and personally. I highly recommend it.
Okay. I was going to ask that too. Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll close.
Okay, thank you very much, Tanya.
Thank you.